Good afternoon, everyone. We're glad to have you with us today with Prestige Senior Living. We are enjoying bringing all of these wonderful webinars to you throughout the last couple years, and we're grateful that our audience is continuing to increase as we learn new information in all the different spaces around senior living, whether it's assisted living, independent living, or memory care. We are very excited to be able to have Dr. Rob Winningham with us today. Dr. Rob has been a great friend to Prestige for many years, really helping out with our wellness categories as far as mind and body development and cognitive information. I'd like to share a little bit about Dr. Rob's bio before we get started. Prestige has been around since 1985. We have many communities up and down the West Coast in 7 different states, 8 different states, if you include all of our skilled nursing communities as well. We offer many different resources to those who do inquiries through us, whether it be for assisted living, independent living, or memory care. We want to meet the needs of those that are reaching out to us, whether you're looking for a place for your mom or dad or a loved one in your family or a good friend to live, to socialize, to be well cared for. We do like to celebrate the social model in our senior living communities, as the past 2.5 years has shown us that being social is so important. We've had to do it in a very safe way, of course, and we practice all of those policies for infection control and all of that with COVID. But we do know that socialization is so important, and it's important to our cognitive health. And so we are really grateful to be able to be a resource for you, to show you what we do within our communities, to celebrate body, mind, and spirit, to engage our residents in so many different ways, present opportunities for adventures and experiences that they've maybe never had in life, and taking time for them to share their experiences, their talents with us as well. And we want to be that resource for you, whether it be learning things to care for a loved one in your own home or in their home, providing really good information that supports you, that makes you feel confident in the care or the direction that you're going as you're maybe looking at a senior living community. That's who we are. We know that it's not always an easy choice to make, but we want to be there to partner with you in any way that we can. And one of those ways that we partner is through these regular webinars. And so with Dr. Rob Winningham, as I said, he has been a friend of Prestige for many years, working with our communities, training our staff, helping other family members to understand what it means to keep your cognition strong and to really exercise your brain, but also engage your body in ways that also helps your brain. And we're seeing more and more information on that in research, that the importance of exercise is important to the brain as well. So Dr. Rob, he received his PhD in neuroscience from Baylor University. He joined the faculty at Western Oregon University in 2000, where he served as professor of psychology and gerontology. He created the gerontology department when he was division chair of the behavior sciences division. He has served as the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and is currently the Provost and Vice President to Academic Affairs, for Academic Affairs at Western Oregon University. His scholarship has focused on memory and aging. He has trained thousands of professionals to offer very high quality cognitive rehabilitation and therapy programs. In addition to publishing many peer-reviewed articles in many on human memory and aging, Dr. Winningham has been invited to give well over 1,500 invited professionals about memory, aging, and various conferences and workshops. We also utilize a lot of Dr. Rob's information on activity connection, which our communities utilize for engagement for our residents. And he also has the book, Train Your Brain, How to Maximize Memory Ability in Older Adulthood, which was published by Baywood Publishing. And his latest book is entitled Cranium Crunches, both of which can be found on Amazon. And we also utilize Cranium Crunches in our Mind Masters program with our life enrichment directors, our wellness coaches in many of our communities communities. So Dr. Rob, we are grateful to have you with us today. We look forward to all the information that you are going to be sharing, and just the help that you provide to us and to help us feel confident in what we're doing every day. So I'm going to hand it over to you to share your expertise and your empathy and your care with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you, Angie, and thank you everybody else for joining today. This is really an exciting opportunity for me as I was listening to Angie talk, and I have worked with Prestige for many years, and to try to help maximize the quality of their programs, which in turn maximizes the quality of life for their many residents. I've had the opportunity, I don't know if I visited most, but I've visited communities, Prestige communities in Washington, Oregon, California, and Nevada. Many of the graduates from our programs, our gerontology program, have gone on to work at Prestige. So it's been a real honor, but kind of preparing for today, it's actually, I kind of look back over the past 25 years of doing research, and so much of what is happening in the Prestige communities is coming out of the research done over the past 20 years, focusing on maximizing quality of life through physical well-being, social well-being, and well-being. So that has been a lot. So today's presentation, we're going to take a really holistic approach, and it's going to be very much research-based, and I'll try not to get too mired in those details, but kind of give you the high-level takeaway points, and then kind of connect that back to what's happening in high-quality communities like Prestige. And you really can see that direct connection, and that's where I just really view that research and working with communities like Prestige is kind of the nexus. All of this is coming together. This is the dream of us research scientists, that the work that we do in the labs makes it into the community and can make real differences. And I see that happening here today. So we're going to be looking at a lot of factors, and I'm going to be focusing on cognition, trying to find ways to maximize cognition, reduce the chance of dementia and other cognitive problems, but a lot of other benefits come from these sorts of interventions. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on. One thing that Angie mentioned, and it's kind of interesting to think about it this way, but the social engagement. I'm not going to end up talking a whole lot about that, but that's what happens in a community environment. If we're looking at a physical exercise class, and we'll talk about different types of physical exercise and what they've been shown to do to the brain, most of those classes have a strong social component. When we talk about brain exercise classes, for many years, I ran brain exercise classes at a clinic in the afternoon, 2 days a week. And it wasn't so much the brain exercises that we did, and now those same exercises that we piloted way back when are now being used in the Mind Master classes and other places. But it wasn't so much those activities, but it was the social connection. That was the glue. And and it was like they were showing up to see their friends, or they were showing up to interact with others. And then I had to get them started and do the brain exercise. I always felt bad shutting down that conversation that invariably took place. So I think that social component is infused throughout a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. But the take-home message from today is there are many things that we can do in middle adulthood and older adulthood that will maximize our cognitive ability and decrease the chance of developing dementia or cognitive impairment. But first, in order to go through this research, I have to define one phrase, and that phrase is executive functioning. Executive functioning includes attention and inhibition. So inhibition means to not do something. So you need to inhibit, right? So we have different types of inhibition. We have cognitive inhibition. I hope right now while I'm talking, you can inhibit thinking about what you're going to have for dinner tonight, right? I hope you can inhibit thinking about something you might be a little bit stressed about and maybe need to come up with a plan to deal with. If you can't inhibit that cognition, those thoughts, then that's going to impair your ability to learn and make new memories. So that's important. But we also have behavioral inhibition, and it's the same idea. It's stopping, something that the body does, but in this case, it's a behavior as opposed to thought. So right now would not be a good time to look at your phone, right? It's something I have to work with my teenage children on, like this is not a good time to look at your phone. Just yesterday, my daughter was getting doing a course to get a boating license. And I said, fine, go for it. You get started, we'll put you up in a quiet place. And I saw her phone sitting next to her. And I said, and don't look at your phone while you're going through this online course, right? That she needed to inhibit the behavior, which is probably fairly automatic. Anytime, some of us get a little bit bored, we go to grab the phone. You need to inhibit that. Executive functioning also includes problem solving, reasoning, planning, and then what we call working or short-term memory. And that's your ability to hold information in your mind for a moment. It could be your ability to hold a phone number. It could be your ability to hold in your mind what you're going to say next. And you see that's easily overwhelmed. I mean, how many times have you seen somebody, they're about to tell you something, they're holding that in their mind, or what we say in their working memory, but then they go off on a quick tangent, right? They go off on a quick tangent and they forget what they were going to tell you. They overwhelm their working memory. And unfortunately, our working memory doesn't hold that much. But we take all of those cognitive abilities, that's what we call executive functioning. And it generally resides in the frontal lobe. So this part of the brain, often we'll point to it when we're talking about executive functioning. And this is going to be key throughout our time together. For example, I challenge you, if I ask you a question throughout this presentation, just say executive functioning. And if you're around other people while you're listening to this, it could be kind of comical because chances are you're going to be correct. So trust me on this. All right, so next slide here. So what factors have been shown to be affected or correlated with dementia risk? And if we were in person, I would have people shout out and we'd have a more in-depth conversation. But in this environment, I'm just going to list them out for you. 50% of your chance of developing dementia is related to genetics. And people argue, is it 45, 50, 55%? You can actually have a career as a researcher arguing that one question, trying to figure that out, and and all of the other variables and factors that affect what that number is. But it's about half of our chance of developing dementia. Frankly, all sorts of things, it lands at about half. But half of your chance of being depressed, how happy you are. I mean, those are related to genetics. So I hope you all chose your parents well. So we can't do much about the genetics. We can talk about it in some situations. And after saying that, I should probably tell you that because if you have a loved one, particularly a full brother, full sister, or parent that had dementia, first degree relative that you share approximately 50% of your DNA with, you might be stressed by what I just told you. I'll tell you that the genetic effects for dementia running in family, the heritability effects, are much stronger for what we call young onset dementia. That's dementia where we have significant symptoms before the age of 65. The good news is this is probably less than 10% of cases. So, if you were a little bit stressed when I talked about the genetics because you have a first degree relative that may have struggled with cognitive impairment, chances are that struggle occurred later in life. If somebody develops dementias in their mid 90s, that's not really that. It's unfortunate for them. We want to have sharp cognition all the way through, but that's not as bad as if somebody develops severe dementia at 55. Some people think that if we lived long enough, that some of the biological processes of the brain, we all would have the neuropathophysiology associated with dementia. So it's the young onset dementia that you should be more concerned about. If you have a first degree relative that developed dementia later in life, then these things that are in our control should be more salient to you. So I put physical exercise first because there's probably the greatest numbers of peer-reviewed published research looking at how physical exercise predicts dementia and can even affect the course of dementia. It even affects the quality of outcomes once people have diagnosable dementia. I might talk about a little bit of that today. So that's a big one. Also cognitive stimulation. And that's what I've spent a lot of my career looking at, developing brain exercises, figuring out the best type of brain exercises to maximize cognitive function. And we'll talk about that. But stress also matters, and controlling stress is an important variable in maximizing not only our quality of life, but also our cognitive abilities moving forward. When we look at all the personality traits that we can measure in psychology, something called neuroticism is the personality trait most correlated with increased chance of developing dementia. And neuroticism is kind of prone to distress and worry. And you probably know people like this in your life, right? Where that no matter what it is, it's a problem. It's stressful for them. They go through their whole life just kind of white knuckling it. And it can be challenging living and working with people that have a high degree of neuroticism. And unfortunately for those people, it puts them at an increased risk of dementia. We don't know why for sure, but it's interesting that the hormone released when we're stressed, and it's called cortisol, that hormone is higher when we're stressed, and it does all sorts of bad things to the body. It impairs our immune system. It causes us to retain fat around the belly area, but it also impairs cognition. It actually can damage the cells in the brain, the neurons. So that might be the link there. Sleep is another one. So about a third of older adults have diagnosable insomnia at some point in their lives, and that really needs to be looked at. We need to do whatever we can to maximize sleep quality, and that's not what this presentation is about, but we could certainly talk for quite some time about the effects of sleep on health and quality of life. I'm actually going to be giving a presentation in Florida at a international conference this fall, and I was already going, and they asked me to do another talk, and they said what we want is sleep and memory, sleep in older adults. That is so important. If this is something, I know there's people that are probably listening to this, that this is something that affects them or their loved ones, and we're not going to talk more about it, but I highly recommend you just do some research online. And it's kind of a strange phrase that you should search for, but it's called sleep hygiene. Which I've never really understood why we call it that, but it's these behavioral things that you can do to maximize your sleep quality. And you can find lists of 10 or 15 things to maximize sleep quality. And I'd highly recommend starting there. The medication for that, there's some better medications for sleep, for insomnia, but they do have the downside, because once you go off those medications, your sleeping problem will be worse if you were on them for a while. So you got to really watch out with that. Melatonin can work for some people in some situations, particularly if their sleep cycle is off. I think the place where I see the greatest empirical support for using melatonin, which is a hormone your pineal gland releases, but you can buy it in pill form, is if you need to adjust your cycle a little bit. So I'll occasionally take melatonin if I've been if I'm going to the East Coast, for example, and I'm going to be there for a while, and I'm on the West Coast. And so if I go to the East Coast, I have to go to bed 3 hours earlier, right, to be in my same cycle. So if I take the melatonin, a couple hours, an hour before going to bed, it can kind of knock me into that sleep cycle, because melatonin is released when it gets dark out naturally. So that can help. In addition, we talked about social support and engagement. Researchers have found older adults who have the lowest perceived social support or the highest perceived loneliness are actually more likely to develop dementia later. And this is really interesting, because it doesn't matter the quality of your social support network, the number of people in it, and what they will do for you, for example, doesn't matter. What matters is that you think you have a good social support network. So, I guess it's like saying it doesn't matter if you have friends, as long as you think you have friends. You get all the benefits of having friends, according to this research. So something's going on there. I think it also could be related to mood, because depression puts people at fairly dramatic increased risk for all sorts of problems. In addition to the depression, anxiety, it's correlated with obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's also correlated with increased chance of dementia later in life. One of the big ones, though, is diabetes and insulin resistance. This is a big component. So you have to control your sugar intake. If you're insulin resistant or pre-diabetic, you really should kind of focus on changing the diet, adding a little exercise, seeing if losing 5 or 10 pounds can bring that resting blood sugar down. So a lot can be done there as well. And then the ones that are kind of next are the newest ones from the research, been added in the past 10 years. I'll talk about them later, but yoga, Tai Chi, and meditation. And do you want to know what yoga, Tai Chi, and meditation all improve? Executive functioning, right? Remember, I told you, if I ask a question, just say executive functioning. Actually, a lot of these do. So physical exercise, cognitive stimulation, sleep, diabetes, yoga, Tai Chi, and meditation, all of those have been associated with executive functioning. So I feel like I kind of started a little bit glum, a little bit gloomy, talking about dementia here, but I have some good news. The dementia rates in the United States are actually plummeting, and that might surprise you, because if you read, newspaper articles or articles online, it sounds like we're having an epidemic with dementia, and that's understandable, because there's two things we could be measuring. We could be measuring the number of cases. And actually, the number of cases of dementia in the US is increasing. But I think more importantly, the proportion or the percentage of older adults with dementia, that is coming down. Does that make sense? Because this is because we have a larger group of older adults. And up until the pandemic, and in most parts of the country, people were living longer. Actually, it's interesting, during the pandemic, it was one of the first times in modern history we've seen a decrease in life expectancy. But we still have a larger group of older adults. And now this is happening, and you see these really large projected numbers of dementia because we have the baby boomers are kind of getting into that, they're beginning to get into that area where they have more dementia. My dad is, actually, he's not officially a baby boomer. He's just a few months off from officially being a baby boomer, but born in 1945, he's 77 years old. And so, he's doing fine, but, he's kind of at that leading edge. And there's a large group of people born right after World War II that are going to kind of be entering this time where they want to pay attention to these things. They want to decrease that risk. But very good news there. The proportion of older adults with dementia is on the decline. So this is actually a different study. Actually, what I just showed you there, this was actually data from Western Europe. But we've seen the same data in the United States. And the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, they look at, they kind of have a common metric that's a little bit different, but they use it for all sorts of health conditions and just reasons people die. I mean, the CDC has, I don't know how many dozens, maybe hundreds of ways people have died in the US. And you can look up the number of people per 1,000 people that died that way or had a certain condition. And so we look at this for dementia, and with the CDC data, the risk of dementia has dropped from 20 cases per 100,000 in the early 1990s to actually quite a bit less than 17 out of 1,000 now. And that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it's significant, and it's not too far off of what they found in Europe. Looking at these figures, we found that men had the most significant drop in the number of dementia cases per 1,000. And just begs the question, what's going on? What are we doing that we're seeing such a significant drop in the proportion of older adults who have dementia? And this is what some of the researchers have hypothesized. One, we're doing a much better job controlling for cardiovascular risk factors, cholesterol, blood pressure. I mean, how many times a year is your blood pressure checked? I mean, they check my blood pressure when I get my teeth cleaned. This is everywhere. You can do it in the grocery store now. You can do it at Costco. And I think, years past, my grandfather died when my dad was young. He died in 1960 and died of a stroke. and he was a firefighter, and he would stay up, do 24-hour shifts, and this was a long time ago, but he would bring a can of condensed cream and just pour it into his coffee for 24 hours. And I bet his blood pressure and cholesterol was through the roof. And if he had been in modern times, that would have been detected. So we're just doing a much better job, and we have medications to reduce cholesterol and blood pressure, and that's a big part of American life now, and that is probably driving a lot of this. Another thing is that there's better education and possibly more cognitive stimulation. In the past 25 years, I've just witnessed a real change in how people approach retirement. It's not that this is a time to just kick back and to disengage and kind of retire from life. You see a large proportion of older adults are just as busy in retirement as they are pre-retirement, or they continue to learn. I mean, they come to lectures done online, like this, and many other things, and that is probably having a difference. Also, and just as importantly, maybe more importantly, is the greater awareness of the importance of physical exercise. Our community gym that I went to up through the pandemic, and kind of do some different exercise now, but for 15 years I went to that gym, and there was a big difference when it turned 9 a.m. That's at 7 a.m. when I would often go. It was mostly working age people trying to get an exercise in before going to work. But then at 9 o'clock, the place changes, and it is a place where the retirees in the community gather, and just tremendous social support. Actually, the person that had this job before me, he was in this office before me. I used to see his wife there, and she just was a social butterfly. And she, I was on these machines. I could often see her. She would do the elliptical, and she would just be on that elliptical for a couple of minutes, and then she would see a friend, and she would hop off that elliptical, and she'd be chit-chatting, and she'd finally come back in 15 minutes, a couple of minutes of exercise, and off. And she was getting some physical exercise, but wow, she was getting a lot of social engagement. So I think many of you have seen this in your life as well. So we'll have a little more to say about physical exercise. I want to tee up cognitive stimulation a little bit more, and then we'll come back to some other ideas here. One of the most prestigious journals now, science journals, is called PLOS One. They reported the results of an 8-week, 3-time-a-week intervention where people went in and they either did computer training to exercise their brain, or they were in a control group that did something else that was unrelated to the computer training. And then they came back, and they would test their cognitive ability again. And they found improvements in immediate memory, which is like working memory I was telling you about, attention, and visual spatial memory. So in just 8 weeks, we saw significant improvements in these scores. And this is what we've seen from our research as well. We've seen some very similar types of findings, and literally dozens of other researchers have reported that too. One researcher, he's kind of a leading researcher, he's in the Mayo Clinic. He was looking at this data, and he found that people who participated in more mentally stimulating activities had a slower rate of decline in their own memory ability. And he wanted to know how big of an effect was this? And it calculated in his research that the mental activity variable accounted for about 15% of the difference in how much the brain and cognitive abilities changed. And that may not sound like a lot, but go back to one of my earlier slides. Remember, 50% of your cognitive ability and your chance of developing dementia has been correlated with genetics. So we only have 50% of this equation left. His research shows that 15% of that is mental activity. Now, I haven't seen the research on what's the percentage for physical and those other things, but this is an important component given that only 50% of the equation is really in our control. This is a study that always makes me just proud. This is a researcher, Justin Kari, who was a student of mine and went on to get his PhD in this area. Justin did a study where he looked at, it's a meta-analysis. So he collected data from previously published studies and we combined them. And I love doing meta-analyses because my biggest fear in doing presentations like this and doing this, sometimes called translational science that we're doing right now. I'm trying to translate science to be used in the real world. The biggest fear in doing translational science is that I'm going to give you a recommendation that turns out to be false. And that happens. Science is self-correcting. But one of the things I try to do to minimize that chance is to look at a lot of meta-analyses. So when there's enough data where we can take the data from 46 studies and we combine that data and look at the findings, we can be pretty sure that that's real. I don't ever recall seeing a significant effect in a meta-analysis that later turned out to be incorrect. So anyways, a meta-analysis. But Justin found that that both cognitive and physical exercise improve cognition. That was the takeaway when he combined all of the data from 46 studies. This researcher did something a little bit different. And I don't know if this phrase is kind of entering common language yet or how much it is, but the idea is it's called dual tasking. And it's different than multitasking. So multitasking is doing two cognitive abilities at the same time. That's what I did not want my daughter doing when she was taking that online course yesterday. I didn't want her simultaneously looking at her phone. She was way into Instagram while she was also taking this online course. And because multitasking doesn't work. Two cognitive tasks at the same time, bad idea. Dual tasking, on the other hand, is doing a cognitive task and a physical task at the same time. So one of the things I like to do with the people that report to me is I like to have walking meetings. So we will walk and we will talk and problem solve. And it can affect. I know sometimes when we're really into something, we slow down, right? We slow our walking down. So I mean, these things can work together. If we do dual tasking and deliberately have people mix physical and cognitive, we see the biggest improvements in executive functioning. It's actually more than either of them alone. So this is kind of a real hot area from the past 5 years of research or so. I'm actually working with both the US Marines and the US Army in doing dual task training and measuring the effects of dual task with soldiers. And actually what we measure is how much is their cognitive performance impaired when they're also doing the physical and vice versa. So anyways, it's kind of a hot topic right now. But these researchers found that not only did they have more efficient brain activity in the prefrontal cortex as measured by an fMRI, they also had improvements in executive functioning. So you're probably saying, great, I'm sold. That's why I'm here. I like to learn new things. What should I do? And you heard from Angie, a lot of the things that we do in the prestige communities directly take advantage of this, in addition to all the socialization. But I'll tell you, one of my favorites is Sudoku. And this is a good example of exercising executive function, because that's what the research shows. The research in this area shows you want to exercise executive functioning, attention, concentration. And if you do that, if you improve executive functioning, then that improvement actually generalizes to things that have never been trained. Because I don't want you to just get better at doing Sudoku puzzles. I want you to be able to remember the things that you need to remember to live independently. I want you to be able to remember that you already took your medication this morning. I want you to be able to remember that you were going to do X, Y, and Z when you got home. You know, those are the things that we want. So it's important, if we get improvement in executive functioning, that generalizes to new areas. So Sudoku is a great example of that. And it's better than crossword puzzles, which don't exercise attention and executive functioning in the same way. And so if you haven't played Sudoku, and I know many of you have, but you need to have numbers 1 through 9 in every horizontal row. Makes sense? Each number is 1 through 9. You need to have each numbers 1 through 9 in every vertical column, okay? And then you need to have each numbers 1 through 9 in every subsquare of 9 cells, all right? So let's look at this top subsquare, It's the top middle subsquare of 9 cells. You can see it as a 6, 7, 8, and 9. What goes in the second row, 6th column over right there? Can you figure that out? And this is a time where saying executive functioning doesn't work. Yeah, it's 5. A 5 goes right there. And it has to be a 5 because if you notice, we already have a 5 in the top row, so we can't have a 5 there. We have a 5 in this third row, so we can't have any 5s there. And so the 5 has to be here because we have to have all numbers 1 through 9. Okay, that requires executive function. That requires attention. Okay, similarly, let's look at the very center subsquare. See, it has 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 in it. So what numbers are missing? 1, 5, and 9. You need to use executive functioning to put that into your working memory. Now, where does 5 go? Does 5 go into cell A, cell B, in the very middle, or cell C? Yeah, it goes in cell A. We know it doesn't go into cell C because we already have a 5 in this column. And so as soon as you notice this 5 here, we know it doesn't go the 5 in the very center column because we already have a 5 there. Now we're just missing numbers 1 and 9. Does 1 go into cell A or cell B? Yeah, it goes into cell A. And then a little deductive reasoning tells us 9 goes there. That's executive functioning, paying attention and having an approach to solve this. You can't be figuring out 1, 5, and 9 are missing and listen to the TV at the same time. So this is an example of that. Now, I said something kind of provocative earlier, possibly. I said that crossword puzzles aren't as good at this. See, crossword puzzles, yeah, you have to read it, but it's retrieving a previously made memory. And actually, people with mid-stage dementia, they're pretty good at retrieving memories from 20 or 30 years ago, based on a cue, based on a question. Like, that's pretty much what crossword puzzles are. But what they're not so good is at making new memories. And you need to have attention, executive functioning to do that. So that's why things like this are very effective. And that's a good example of the types of activities we've seen in cranium crunches, which are used in the Mind Masters program in the prestige communities. It's also, they had mentioned they work with Activity Connection. Activity Connection actually partners with, last count, 20,000 retirement communities, 20,000 retirement communities around the US. And they have a lot of activities. And what I've helped them make are true cognitive stimulation activities, largely focusing on executive functioning. So that's a great product that Prestige has there. So physical exercise. Thomas Jefferson said, walking is the best possible exercise. Habituate yourself to walk very far. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about that quote. This is just something that the humans are meant to do if they have that ability, is to walk. It's a great exercise, as you know. I try to keep these studies fairly current, but I kept this 20-year-old study in this presentation because this, in my mind, was a classic study. Before 2003, the research on physical exercise and memory and cognition was really messy. And people did not agree. These researchers, and this guy, Art Kramer, he's still at it. He's at University of Illinois doing some great work. But what he found was that there were a number of variables that related to how exercise improved cognition or memory. And he found that the older you are, and he had these 3 groups, so people 66 to 80, which doesn't sound that old as we get closer to these ages, but these groups benefited more in terms of their memory ability with more exercise than the younger people, which is an interesting finding. For some reason, females benefited more than males. Nobody has been able to figure that out in an empirical way. And I've seen people try to propose some endocrine, some hormonal hypotheses for that. And I don't know. You know what I think the gender effect is here? Why do women benefit more from physical exercise on their cognition than men do? It may be because that example I told you about, my former boss who was in this office, his wife, where when she went to the gym, she was not only getting a light physical workout because she didn't exercise that much, but not only getting a light physical exercise, but she was getting social stimulation. And we've seen that social engagement is critical for maximizing brain health. And that's why I was just kind of really struck by the comments that Angie made in the opening comments of just about, that really is what communities do. These retirement communities like Prestige do, is they provide that opportunity for social engagement. And I don't know, this might be why we found this effect here. Nobody's come up with a better explanation, in my opinion. The other variable, and this was why this has been really important, this finding right here, aerobic and strength training was better than aerobic alone. So what we have found, this was the first one, but then there's a ton of research in the past 20 years to replicate this. Doing both aerobic training, where we're going to increase our heart rate, increase our oxygen use, and strength training, or sometimes it's called resistance training, lifting light weights. And it can even be body supported exercise. So you can do this. I mean, you can get a pretty much a decent body workout without lifting actual weights. You can do things such as sit to stand. And so sit in a chair, stand up as many times as you can in a minute, count them, kind of gamify it for yourself, try to beat your best score. Do that a few days a week. You can do that. I mean, that's what a lot of yoga strength training is, just getting into various positions, getting up and down off the floor, bending down, coming back up. And then, sometimes if you just add what's called a TheraBand, you ever seen that rubber band material? You can get a full body workout doing that. You can step on it and hold on to it and do biceps, step on one and do triceps, get a whole body workout. And then, not surprisingly, the length of the program mattered. The longer they did the physical exercise program, the more it mattered. So really important studies, a lot of good ideas there. So executive functioning, that's what's improved with the exercise. And that was something else that those previous researchers kind of cued us into, allow us to look at in the past 20 years. And sure enough, that's what we have found. Aerobic training, strength training, yoga, Tai Chi, something called high intensity interval training. Some of you may have heard about this. You can even take the course, it's called HIIT courses at a lot of gyms. But high intensity interval training, what it is you exercise as hard as you can for a really short period of time. It can be just like 2 minutes, and then you give yourself a break. And then you exercise as hard as you can for a short period of time, and then you give yourself a break. That has actually been shown to be very effective. And it's interesting, some of the research in that area, the HIIT training has been shown to release growth hormones, or what we technically call brain-derived neurotrophic factors. So imagine you had the growth hormones of a young child in your brain. You can just, learn dozens of new words a day, because that's what children learn, just without even trying. Some of those types of growth hormones are increased at a far greater rate with HIIT training, which is really compelling in my opinion. I sort of do HIIT training. I like I live in Oregon. It's a wonderful place to road cycle, ride bicycles in the road long distances. And it's kind of hilly around here. And I often kind of feel like there's high intensity training, just if you ride a lot, it's pretty easy just to go, you kind of your standard rate, if it's 13, 15, 16 miles per hour on the flat. But then you have to do HIIT training, you go uphill, and then you get a break when you go downhill. So, and then dual tasking, which I mentioned. So a lot of research there. This strength training stuff is important. This important research out of Teresa Lou Ambrose, she reported that either once or twice a week resistance training for 12 months led to significant improvements in attention. So just imagine older adults doing once a week light weights, like we were talking about, body weighted TheraBand, or it looks like he might have 5-pounders there. Do that once a week for 20 minutes, 11% improvement in executive functioning. I mean, imagine if you could take a pill that could improve your executive functioning by 11%, that would be breaking news. We don't have that pill, but we have the answer. And it is, in part, resistance training. These people are actually in the same lab. And this researcher found that doing twice a week resistance training in people who had mild cognitive impairment, which is just one step away from diagnosable dementia. People that have mild cognitive impairment, about 20% of them will get dementia in the next 12 months, and the majority of them will get it in the next few years. So this is a time where it's really important to do something. You might want to know what mild cognitive impairment looks like. Mild cognitive impairment, it's all shades of gray, from a little bit of worry, something to be worried about, to mild cognitive impairment, to early stage, to mid stage dementia. It's all a continuum there. But mild cognitive impairment is not supposed to be affecting your quality of life yet, and that's actually part of the diagnostic criteria. But ironically, there's some research shows that's when it does start to affect quality of life. You're going to see people, kind of mess up on their checkbooks at this point more than they did before. You'll just see a little more challenge in taking care of themselves. Just some things, they might get lost a little bit more. It's not the point where, they absolutely, need to change their life circumstances necessarily, but you notice it. They notice it as well. So that's kind of the mild cognitive impairment. Twice a week with this group, significant improvements in attention and memory that are sustained if they keep this up. There's a medication or two that you can take at this stage. One is Aricept, and this is about the effect you get with Aricept, which can have some GI, gastrointestinal side effects, and we get all the benefit of that just with twice a week resistance training. And then sometime later, maybe the individual working with their doctor could choose to add Aricept even beyond that. So this is a really important finding. Now, in terms of people that have progressed a little farther along that continuum I was talking about, they did a study, and this was published in the Journal of American Medical Association, did a study that they offered people in memory care. So this is different than the populations we've been talking about up to this point, but these are people who already have diagnosable dementia. It's been determined that they really can't live safely independently. Many times it's too much for a spouse to care for them. And so we have these wonderful memory care communities around the country. And it can be expensive to live in memory care. It's not my area of expertise, but $100,000 a year is not unheard of at all. So they did a study in these settings, and all they did was a fitness instructor knocked on people's doors, gave them a chance to exercise. They said, "Hi, I'm here. I'm so-and-so, and I brought some exercise equipment. Do you want to exercise with me for 15 minutes? They didn't even have to participate. Just being given this opportunity, enough of them participated to save, on average, $12,000 a year was saved in caring for these people. And the researchers found was they didn't improve their memory because their memory had been too impaired at this point, but they were more independent. They were better able to do what we call activities of daily living. Those include getting to the bathroom on your own, being able to take care of all that toileting, to be able to prepare some simple meals, to dress yourself. I mean, just those things that can really affect your quality of life. Because if you can't do, those ADLs, then you need to have somebody come in to support you. They also were more mobile. They scored higher on a standardized functional mobility test, where they could get up, they could walk, they could get back and walk down without a problem. And they're also less likely to have other comorbidities, particularly heart disease. And I guess I'll stop now and get kind of a quick tangent that we always talk about Alzheimer's as being almost synonymous with dementia. Alzheimer's is just one of many types of dementias. It's the most common, though. The second most common type of dementia is vascular dementia, caused by a stroke. And it's interventions like this that are very much in our control, and we can reduce the chance of having a vascular event, having a stroke, which can build up over time or lead to fairly debilitating outcomes fairly immediately. Tai Chi, this has been shown to improve both mental and physical health. Looked at a meta-analysis again on Tai Chi, 20 studies, and lo and behold, Tai Chi improved executive functioning. And just kind of looking at the programs that Prestige has, they have things like this. Their strength and balance program, it'd be interesting for me to kind of look at that and juxtapose it to Tai Chi, but you're going to get the benefits of Tai Chi in a strength and balance program. They might be doing Tai Chi and they're just calling it strength and balance, but that's great. I mean, you get these types of benefits when you can get yourself or a loved one in a community that has access to this type of programming. Another meta-analysis concluded that Tai Chi could significantly improve the majority of global outcomes related to cognitive abilities, attention, learning, memory, emotion, perception, and execution. So kind of what we've been talking about here. Same with yoga. 15-study meta-analysis on yoga, and they found yoga improved executive functioning. And I did a lot of yoga during the pandemic. My son and I do yoga. He's a young teenager, and he likes to do it with me in the morning. And then my son and I, sometimes he has a hard time going to bed, so we meditate at night. And so love doing yoga. And if you think about what yoga is, I've come to the conclusion that I believe yoga is both a cognitive stimulation activity and a physical exercise, and it has both, depending on how you do it, because you can get resistance training. I mean, you're doing things similar to push-ups, your body up and down. You're doing some things that use a lot of muscles, so that's a resistance training. But you can do yoga in a way, you don't have to, but you can do yoga in a way that kind of gets your heart rate going and is more aerobic in nature. But yoga is also related to attention. So when you really kind of get into yoga, a lot of it is focusing on your breath, and you might breathe in, just a simple movement, breathing in with one movement, breathing out with another movement. That focus on your breath while you're moving, it's also dual tasking, I suppose, but that focus on your breath while you're moving, staying attentive to your breath, is cognitive stimulation. And I would say the same for meditation. Like the type of meditation I do with my son, we usually do some deep breaths, and often we'll try to associate with an emotion, breathe in love, breathe out love, and things like that. But then I'll do a body scan with him. And so he's laying on his bed, I'm laying on this floor by his bed, and we slowly relax every part of his body. And so take a breath, relax, and I'll say, relax your toes, relax the bottom of your feet, relax your heels, the top of your feet. And we literally go through it. And sometimes we just take a moment and we just relax our whole body after a deep breath. But that meditation is what we need to be exercising in terms of executive functioning. So you have to stay focused. And that's why I think it's really helpful for my son and others to use that to fall asleep, because he can't think about all those things racing through his head while he's trying to go to sleep, if he's trying to relax his heel or his shin or his calf. So that was kind of what I prepared for you here today. You can see a lot of these types of opportunities in terms of the social activities, the physical activities, the yoga, the Tai Chi, the brain exercises, the strength exercises. A lot of these can be, you can find them in your life, and you certainly can find them in a community like the Prestige communities. The Cranium Crunches workbooks that were mentioned, they're in the Mind Masters class. You can also find those on Amazon. The sum of all these activities can really affect quality of life. So that was what I was prepared. I'm happy to answer any questions that might have come in.
Yes, we do have open availability in your screen. If you would like to put a question in the Q&A chat or in the chat function at the bottom of the screen, and we will try to answer any questions you have. In the meantime, Dr. Rob, one of the things, we were just, a group of us were invited to present in London at the Alzheimer's Disease International Conference, and many of us utilized black cabs to get around. And the cabbies, several of them told us when they heard that we worked in senior living and memory care, how they, in many ways, dual task, like you were talking about, and they have a low cognitive decline amongst Black cab drivers because they're constantly in movement with driving, physical activity, and then that mental activity, that cognitive activity of, trying to plan out where they're going. But they also had the component of the socialization too. So I thought that was really fascinating that they were aware of that in their own jobs.
That really is interesting. And you're right. I mean, there used to be a lot of research on the effects of education, attainment on cognitive outcomes. The more education you get, the less likely you are to have dementia. But that's so easy to measure. Really, we want to measure how people live their lives. It's probably more important how you live your life day to day than if you got a bachelor's degree, right? And those cabbies were really showing that. But there's actually a very old study on London cab drivers that there's a part of the brain, it's in the hippocampus, but there's a part of the hippocampus, and we have two of them in our middle of our temporal lobes deep in there, that is for spatial memory. And they did autopsies on, it was London taxi cab drivers, they did autopsies on their brain, and they had a larger part of their brain dedicated to spatial memory. Which obviously getting around London requires tremendous spatial memory. So that group actually has been studied in this context.
Very interesting. And I also wanted to highlight the fact that you mentioned the TheraBands for strength. And that's one of the things that we find is very beneficial in our expressions memory care communities. We utilize the TheraBands quite often for exercise with our residents. We want them to be having healthy exercise activities at least twice a day throughout their day. And so those TheraBands have been a wonderful component of that. And so we appreciate that you highlight that as well.
And I'd also like to point out, I know that in most of your communities, the residents can get access to a personal trainer, and they could do assessments. I know you do a lot of that. That's really valuable because sometimes all it takes is just purchasing some TheraBands. You can get them on Amazon for $10. You can have your own, because they have different resistance and different colors. But you just need somebody to kind of show you how to do it, to kind of get a full body workout and check with you every so often. So I love that you have the professionals there to help people get started on programs like that.
Excellent. Well, we do have a couple of questions here. What are good workouts for people with mobility issues? High intensity training won't work for my loved one. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One, there are, it depends on how severe the mobility issues are. We do, and it may be possible to rehabilitate some of that. I worked really closely with physical therapists in this space, and in that environment, if you have access to that, we have weight supported treadmills. So imagine a treadmill that actually has you in a harness, and then there's an apparatus around you. We can actually rehabilitate people to get them to back so they have better mobility. So I just, if there's mobility issues, the first thing that comes to my mind, let's try to get with a good geriatric physical therapist and see what we can do. I also know that that we have treadmills in the water. And they're called Hydrox machines, and so you can, like, after a knee replacement, if you have the good access to a good physical therapist, you can actually be walking on a treadmill with water up to your chest. So wonderful things there. But in addition to that, they have things for upper body strength. Imagine a little bicycle thing, just a tabletop, and you can get a good upper body workout there. There's other things that can be done in terms of seated yoga. It wouldn't surprise me if you do this in some of your communities, that there are seated yoga classes that can be taken. There's even some of these that are available online. There's a woman that did this for PBS for many years based out of Spokane, Washington, and many of her videos are still there. So personally, I would begin with a physical therapist just to see what we can do to maximize the mobility, and then try to add some of these others in terms of like doing the arm exercises, trying to get the heart rate up there, even the seated TheraBand, seated yoga. There's quite a bit we can still do.
Very good.
But asking about the science journals. You want to read the question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, it said, could you specify the year of the studies in the science journals? the first of the few slides, there was no mention of the published year, went really fast. So it's kind of hard to do after the fact here. Yeah, I'd taken out some of these years. If there was one that people really wanted, they're from the past 10 years generally. So sorry, I didn't think people would want to know the exact year for all of them, but they're generally in the past 10 years.
Very good, thank you. The chat was disabled, but it is now functioning if anyone does want to put a question in the chat or in the Q&A. I know we are coming to the end of our time, and so if you do have any other questions that you would like to ask, feel free to do that right now. Dr. Rob, we are really just grateful for all the information you provided for us today. Just some really great insight and some things that we can continue to think about after this webinar. I do want to let everyone know that the slides to the webinar will be sent out afterwards. We appreciate you sharing those with us. We're always here. You could always reach us on prestigecare.com to ask us questions, look for resources. We do have some upcoming webinars in the future. I do see we do have a couple more questions here in the bottom. So let me look here at the chat. Thank you, Dr. Rob. Yes, thank you so much. Let me see here. Not a question, just a thank you. Thank you all. I really appreciate your attendance today. We had a good group join us today. And as I said, we do have some upcoming webinars. We have one on August 26th with Laura Valancourt, who's a great friend to Prestige as well, talking about mental health in the elderly. And so we hope you'll join us for that on August 26th at 10 a.m. You can sign up at prestigecare.com. We always have, as I said before, lots of resources there. If you have any questions about communities in your own areas, for those of you that are joining us from different places around the states and even around the world, we want every once in a while to get a few of those. And so we're grateful to answer any questions you have on that. Let me see here. We have a few more in the chat. I'm an aquatic specialist. You mentioned treadmills and water walking. What do you feel about HIIT in a pool? Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So HIIT, high intensity interval training, I think it's great. And, because we want people to do it. And, the part that I didn't really talk about, but hopefully it was infused throughout, is motivation. It's good to see the benefits of doing these things and how it affects your quality of life. And for some people, just having a little more variety and having some success at it. And I feel like many people can have success in the pool where they might not have the same level of success elsewhere. So I think the aquatics opportunities are really important. The Hydrox machines are the treadmills in a pool for therapy settings, and that's fabulous. But doing the HIIT training in a pool is a great idea. So this would be, I could see Lorelei doing this, right? Going really intense on the exercise in the pool for a few minutes to try to get the heart rate up, and then taking a break. The nice thing about that, we find that I kind of went off on the brain-derived neurotrophic factors there on that one, but it actually it's a more efficient way of getting the benefits. So what you could do in 20 minutes of HIIT training in a pool is going to be better than a longer period of not doing HIIT training. So yeah, do the HIIT training wherever people can do it and have some fun.
Very good. And we also have, I'm a 71-year-old male who is still very active doing land clearing with hand power tools and a tractor. And I have found that my strength and activities from outdoor activities keep my mind sharp. I have also felt nutrition is very important. This is just a way to stay strong. Thank you so much for sharing all about your wellness in your own life where you are living, and that you're still continuing to work out and eat healthy. All right. Well, Dr. Rob, I think that is all of our questions for today. Lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you from us at Prestige. We look forward to joining you in the future and continuing to work with us. Thanks everyone for attending today. Anything further from you, Dr. Rob?
No, just a huge thing. That was fun. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much. Have a great day.